case brought under the Sex Discrimination Act, under the Disability Discrimination Act, under the Age Discrimination Act, and for all the other complaints made under the Race Discrimination Act, which are not 18C, but racial discrimination in employment or the provision of services. If it said that there should be some change to the processes prompted by concern about particular 18C complaints or particular 18C cases, all of those other types of discrimination complaints and discrimination cases have to be considered as well.
Landscape. If 12,750 people in 6 key seats, that's a total number across 6 electorates, had voted differently, we would be the government. It was that close. And in a country of 24 million people, that's close. And this was only one term after Labor was conclusively defeated and reduced to 55 seats. So the first thing I say is that people should take heart. The Labor Party is in a good position. And what we did is we went back to our core values and people had a clearer view of what we stood for. But you're quite right. The challenge is not just the 2 big parties. The challenge is, if you like, third parties. There is significant dissatisfaction with politics as usual in our community. Now, I don't happen to think that anyone who voted for us at the last election, having looked at the last 5 or 6 months since the election, has buyer's remorse. I think they're still happy that we're doing what we're doing. But there is, I think, a proportion of our fellow Australian who feels that the existing institutions, the status quo, is not serving their interests. Now, for some people, some of the arguments appealing to race, well, I guess there's some people who are beguiled by that rubbish. For some people who vote for the Greens, they perhaps like their economic oversimplification that you basically don't have to worry about how you pay for any promises. But there is a proportion of voters who vote for third parties who want to see some disruption, and they want to see the system working for them. And when I say disruption, what I mean is they feel that their vote no longer changes anything. They feel that everything's a done deal by vested interests. They feel there is a lack of authenticity in the political process. So our challenge, and it's not just with the African community, it's not just with, indeed, migrant communities, it's with all Australians, is how do we rekindle a sense of authenticity, a greater sense of sincerity, a sense that we have a plan for the social and economic betterment of the nation. Within that, if I can answer questions to parents in your community and to young people growing up and to older Australians, if I can answer the question where the jobs are going to come from, if I can answer the question that when they're sick they can afford to see a doctor, if I can answer the question as people grow older, will they be able to access proper care, if I can answer the question that when you live in the country you get as good a deal as when you live in the city and all the basics, if I can answer the question of how we tackle the scourge of ICE in our communities, if I can answer the question how we're preparing the future against the harmful effects of climate change, I don't think that for all the cultural differences between communities, that the fundamentals are greatly different between most Australians. It's my challenge and our challenge to convince Australians to trust us. Now, it's very hard within the space of one election. There's a natural tendency in this country, leave aside Trump and Brexit and all those other remarkable events, Australians tend to give governments a second go. And I think some of you might recall that sort of fairly strained ad where they had a fake tradie, it became known as, where the argument in this Liberal Party ad from this fake tradie was, well, they haven't been too bad, maybe we should just give them another go. So I think there's some of that too. So I don't think that what happened in the United States and Europe is immediately replicable in Australia, but I think some of what's happened there has lessons for Australia. But just as when people don't buy your newspapers, for example, you can say that the readers don't understand the value of what you're printing. Or perhaps you need to look at how you're selling and what it is you're providing for people. So I can't control what happens overseas. I can't control everyone's individual set of values, nor do I seek to. But I think if we're to reach out to the African community, as a subset of migrant communities, as a subset of the Australian, the wider community, we've got a plan for jobs. We have a plan for people's health. If we have a plan for training, skills, education, if we have a plan for taking action on climate change, if we have a plan for people's security and our national interest, if we have a plan which recognises the importance of families in communities, then I think we can help appeal to people. But of course there's individual things which you can do, and I'll hand over to my colleagues in a moment at this point. The more that we get people understanding the ballot papers, the more that we get people understanding the process of elections, the more that we make sure that people are enrolled to vote, all of that helps too. And the more that we ask people, the only vote in life we're guaranteed not to get is the one you don't ask for. And I suppose in part that's why we see you as an important source of information and news for your communities, and that's why we're talking to you, because we won't wait to have this conversation 3 weeks before an election. We want to build relationships of trust. And by that you've got to report what we say fairly. We want to make sure that you don't see us as people who just come along at the very end of the day, and that you form an editorial view that we have respect for your communities of readers.